Simon Kaylor from Oakwell Clinic. Welcome to Cosmetic Pros.
Thanks.
So, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got started?
Depends whether you want the long answer or the short answer, I guess, because as you know, I see myself as being fairly new to SMP in that my business has been going sort of bang on 3 years now. And it wasn't an industry that I'd ever thought about getting into. It was obviously something that I knew about because I've lost my hair anyway. So I'd been looking into SMP for quite a long time, but purely from a sort of client perspective. So really my background before that, if I talk a little bit about that, is the music industry. I moved to Leeds in 1999 to study at what was called Leeds College of Music back then. And that was always sort of my thing. I was going to pursue music, and that's what I did. So I graduated from there and went on to have a successful career as a saxophonist. And I've got to play with some amazing people in some amazing groups. And I've also, as we were talking about before the podcast, I've also been a lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire for coming up for around over 15 years now. And that's what I got into before I got into the SMP industry. It was really, I guess, I was at a point in my life where I've got 2 young kids now, and I was thinking that I was spending a lot of time away, a lot of driving up and down the motorway, a lot of flying out to places to do gigs. And I kind of felt for a while that I would like to have something that I was doing work-wise that would maybe give me a bit more flexibility in terms of how much time I had to spend away from home and what sort of gigs I was doing. There's a lot of time when I was driving to the South Coast on a Friday evening and sort of questioning my life choices. And it was actually through researching SMP as a client that I just got totally into it. And I found this whole sort of world of SMP that I didn't know anything about. And I started to get really interested in, I think one of the things that probably links to my life as a musician is that I started to become really interested in why different artists' work looked the way it did. And it got to the point where images were coming up on social media and I instantly knew whose it was. Just from seeing the picture, I knew whose work that was. And I started to get really interested in why, someone like Ollie Hughes, why his work looks different to maybe someone like Michelle Broom from Scalp Diverse, or the guy I studied with, Tom May. I was interested and I started reading up on what approaches they were using and any sort of little nuggets of advice that they had about pigment choices or needle choices or how they approach the treatments. And that sort of got me really interested in it. And that was when I sort of went down the rabbit hole, I guess, and started really thoroughly researching and then chatting to a number of clinics about getting my own treatment done. And it was then that I spoke to Tom May down at Ink on Hair in Bristol. And it was like a light bulb moment because he said, "Oh, I wouldn't be able to fit you in for a little bit because I'm doing some training." And it was then that I said, "What, you train people to do this?" And he said, "Yeah, that's, part of what I do." And immediately I just thought, that's absolutely the thing that I want to get into. It ticked all the boxes for me. And it was something I was really excited about. I was learning loads of new stuff about it and I was sort of in that zone and just decided to go for it.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you said about, and certainly doing it from the start on a client view about being able to like recognize the difference between work. Because I think, even myself, I work with SMP, but I'm not an artist, so I am an outsider.
Yeah,
And there can be, the illusion to someone new that everyone's the same. It's just, dots on a head. But I think the
exactly.
more
Yeah.
you get involved in the industry and kind of get to know there is a lot more to it. There's a lot more like, different levels of skill. And I mean, it took me a while of working with SMP to know that. So I think, definitely having that insight from straight away, you've definitely probably found, that's a bit of a calling career for yourself. You had that?
Yeah. And that thing of identifying different styles, I think that was just like, as a client, it made me realize that not everyone is looking for the same thing. And that's why when I sort of consult with potential clients, I never try and I hear a lot of people coming to me and saying, "I've already had a meeting with this person, and they've said they're the best." And to me it's like, this isn't maths. It's not like a black or white thing. It's essentially like an art thing, right? So it's, we call ourselves SMP artists. And I do think like you can't say that. Well, obviously there's differences in sort of standards of SMP, and that's something I really want to talk about. But you get to a certain level where there's a lot of people producing great work, and it comes down to what the client wants. I definitely have a preferred style that I like to go for. That might not be for everyone. You've got so many artists now that are producing really good SMP, but as we said, you can tell whose is whose, and certain clients will want certain things and certain clients will want other things, and that's cool. I think that's what makes it interesting as well.
Definitely. So you started in 2020 when we all had great fun in the sort of COVID era.
Yeah.
Was that already in place when you started, or did it kick in just after you started?
So yeah, it was my memory for that whole period is a bit hazy. But yeah, I basically set up my clinic just as we were going into a lockdown. So it was pretty much the worst time that I could have done it.
But yeah, to have a local business.
Yeah.
So were there any particular challenges you had to overcome, in that you think gave you an extra sort of learning or insight? Essentially you opened your clinic in one of the toughest periods and had to come through. So
Do you know what? I think anyone who starts in the S&P industry, there's going to be a load of challenges. There's certain things you've got to do. Building your portfolio is never easy, and trying to work out how you fit in the sort of landscape of other artists around you. Are you going to go in and just charge sort of next to nothing to try and get clients, but is that going to get you a certain type of client base? Or it I guess the main challenge I had was that for a long period of time we just weren't allowed to have I wasn't allowed to have any clients. So maybe in a way that was quite a good thing in terms of it allowed me a bit more time to work on maybe some of the behind the scenes stuff that are really important when you're setting something like that up. And also not, I mean, one of my, I guess my primary sort of focuses with my business is total transparency. I just feel like if you're honest with the clients and you're totally transparent and you keep them in the picture every step of the way, that's the best way to be. And that's something that's really important to me. Having said that, one of the things I did find was once lockdown had lifted, I got a lot of people contacting me, sort of potential clients contacting me, and they would say, "How long have you had the business for?" And in a way, it was, I don't know if it was disingenuous of me at that point, but I would say, "Well, I've had the business, 6 months now or a year." Unless they asked me directly, "How many clients have you done in that time?" I kind of didn't necessarily have to divulge that information, but I do think it kind of put me ahead in a weird kind of way because people saw me as being established. They might have already seen my clinic, mentioned on social media. They saw that I had a page, they saw that I had a website. And in a way, it kind of, I guess by the time I hit the ground running, I already had all that stuff in place. So maybe it's set me up a little bit better.
blessing in disguise almost.
Yeah.
So I know from speaking with you before, one of the things you pride yourself on is your consistency of work and output. So how do you kind of find that leads into your success? One, for kind of bringing the clients in, and just like your own standards, how do you maintain that?
I think, well, I guess there's a couple of different things that I'd need to sort of speak about to answer that properly. The consistency thing was really important to me, and that's because it's something that I remember vividly from when I was like a student studying the saxophone and sort of learning to play jazz. And that is that consistency was one of the hardest things for me. So I might go out and play at a jam session or a gig, and I would play to a certain level, and I'd be really pleased, and I'd come home and think, yes, I've done it. I've got to that point that I needed to be at. And then 2 days later, I'd go and play somewhere else and just wouldn't manage to play to the level that I'd played to 2 days previously. It was a real struggle to get that consistency where I felt, no, actually now I'm consistently every gig, every jam session, every time I'm recording, whatever, I'm managing to get that level. And that was something that I then wanted to sort of bring with me to SMP. I think it's entirely possible to do a good SMP treatment and then not do another good one the next time, because you're dealing with skin. It's not doing a painting on a wall, and there's a lot to learn. So for me, yeah, I really wanted to get to the point where I could confidently speak to somebody. You know, if I had a guy who was completely bored, I wanted to be able to confidently say, I can get you a really good, like a really good buzz cut look, and and no one's going to know that you've had SMP. You know, that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say it's going to look so natural and so good that people aren't going to know. So yeah, I didn't just want to do one good treatment and then let a few slip and have a couple of not so good ones, and then do another good one, you know, and put the good ones on social media. I wanted to make sure that the consistency was there. So I was happy with every single client that I was treating. And I think for me personally, the way I do that is I like to really take my time with treatments. Not in terms of, you know, I know there are guys out there that do sort of 7 hour sessions or 9 hour sessions. That's not my approach. I genuinely like to split my treatments into four, you know, a treatment into 4 sessions. So I think the average for most clinics is probably 3. And I know some clinics are finishing treatments in 2, but I always like to do 4. And it's just a case of layering up more cautiously and really taking the time to let that heal and see how it's healed in that skin, you know, the needle choice, the pigment choice. And just, I feel like if you work more cautiously and you layer a treatment gradually, you get to the point you need to get to without overstepping the mark and making it look less real.
Yeah, 100% from artists I've spoken to. I think definitely the 3 to 4 sessions and using that layering process
Yeah,
is the route to go for. And if I was speaking to anyone looking at SMP, I would kind of tell them to look at the people who are doing the multiple sessions over
yeah,
then the faster treatment. And I think also, yeah, like you said, it's kind of easier to do more and add more. But once you've gone too far in a session,
yeah.
it's gonna
And
kind of take you
and
to more that corrective work.
it's difficult
Um,
because we're obviously really sort of influenced by what we see online. And you know, this is one of the things I've sort of mentioned to you before when we've been sort of chatting and messaging, is that I do think there are so many unrealistic expectations and sort of unrealistic output on social media. And I think as a new artist, that could be pretty overwhelming, and it could make you think that you have to work in a certain way to be successful. And I think for me, being, you know, being a little bit older, having had a career in something else and done well, I'm kind of at an age where I'm not going to be swayed by that as much. You know, I sort of have the self-confidence to make my own mind up about things in you know, in a lot of aspects. And if I see someone, you know, and they're doing 1,000 dots in a minute and they're, you know, firing out this SMP, or they're going super dense and super dark on session 1, I don't let that kind of put me off my path, you know. I see
yeah,
a lot of people posting, here's a great result from session 1, and it doesn't look like my session 1. It looks like my session 2 or even a session 3, you know, but that's cool. That's their thing, and I'm doing my thing. And I just have to have that conviction and kind of stay on track with what I want to do.
yeah, I think that's a really good mindset to have. I think especially not even just in SMP and kind of all stuff now with the social media world, it's really hard
Yeah,
to kind of not get influenced, ask what's real, keep up with the Joneses sort of thing.
yeah,
And sometimes we've got to realize that a lot of what we see on social media isn't real. It's sort of
yeah,
manufactured. It's done in a certain way. There's sort of cuts, edits. I even find as well sometimes just all round in business, some of the busier people on social media aren't necessarily the busiest people in actual clinic
yeah,
or in
yeah,
actual doing work, and that's why they've got time to be so good on social media.
yeah.
They need to
You should,
obviously
it's
focus
funny
that.
you should say that, because I've in the past been contacted by other clinics. It's like the SMP community is a really good community, and I really enjoy it. And there are, you know, there are artists that have been really, really helpful to me when I was starting out, and there are artists that I stay in touch with now and chat to, and we sort of, you know, we'll just talk about whether we're going through a quiet patch or whether it's busy, or, you know, if you had any problems with clients, anything like that. And interestingly, from time to time, I do get messages from a couple of people saying, are you all right? Are you busy enough? Are you still going? Because I haven't posted anything on social media.
Yeah.
And that's literally, you know, I don't want to say it, but often it is. It's just because I am busy, and I haven't always got the time or the enthusiasm to do that thing.
So just kind of lastly on this, sections on your success. I know you kind of hit 6 figures in your second year. Did you have, was that how planned was that? Did you sort of put any strategies in? Was it a bit of trial and error? What did you find, contributed to helping achieve that?
So I think I was naive to the business side of things when I started. Coming from the industry that I'd come from, I didn't have any sort of business experience. A lot of being a musician is word of mouth and it's recommendation through other musicians, and you go and do a gig and someone hears you and they get your number and they book you for something else. And I never really had to sort of promote myself in any kind of way. And when I started out with the clinic, I did the things that thought I should do. I set a website up, I set my social media up, I got business cards printed, I got some flyers printed. And then I remember the day when I published the website and it sort of went, yeah, it's live. And I had this moment where I sat there and I thought, what happens now? How will people know that I'm doing this? Does the phone start ringing? But obviously that's that period where you're new to it and you're sort of, in a way, I was kind of hustling. So I was speaking to friends and family and I was doing treatments for friends and family, which was sort of helping to build my portfolio. But yeah, I was really at a point then where I felt like I kind of exhausted those avenues. The friends of mine that I knew were going to be receptive to it had booked in and had a treatment done, and family members had had them done. And then I really kind of felt like it just dropped off a cliff, and I thought, okay, I've exhausted that. I need to start getting clients independently now, and I think I've done the right things to sort of get that in place, but it wasn't happening. And it was actually, I'm not going to mention any names, but it was actually a marketing company that I spoke to, and they contacted me and said, we've got availability in your area and we can start marketing for you. And it was basically social media marketing at that time. And even though it maybe didn't work out long term for me with that company, in the sort of immediate term, it was probably the best thing I could have done for my business at that point. It was expensive, for me, not knowing really much about this industry, and thinking, okay, I can get into it and I can make this happen. I can make the website, I can do the flyers, I can do the business cards. It was suddenly this huge expense to me that was sort of placed in front of me, but I could see from the sort of numbers that they were talking about that it was going to be beneficial. And I was very much of the mindset of, I've kind of feel like I've hit this brick wall. I need someone to take over that side of things because I don't know anything about it. And yes, it's going to cost me up front, but a worst case scenario is that I lose what I invest. And a best case scenario to me at that point was I make back what I've invested. And it was really successful for me, sort of almost overnight. And I think that was the thing that got that sort of started the snowball going. And I just used that early period while I was busy to build my portfolio. It was for me about getting experience in terms of doing treatments, experience in terms of doing consultations and speaking to clients and sort of finding out what their expectations were, and experience for me of running a business and scheduling things and seeing how many clients I could realistically work on in a week. And yeah, I just kind of used that as a learning curve and made sure I got lots of photos, and back then had that enthusiasm to do the social media thing every evening. Every single treatment I was doing videos, I was doing photos, I was trying to do maybe some live streams, I was doing all sorts of things and trying to capitalize on that. And it really worked out. But as I said, long term, it kind of, that relationship with that company didn't last, but it had put me in a really good position to kind of keep going. And I'd learned a lot from doing it. So yeah, I think that success in year two was largely down to that. I think it was handing that thing over to somebody who actually knows what they're doing, and it made a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. I think certainly in SMP as well, that first, it's kind of almost that black hole, that first bit of getting that first portfolio up, like if you're sub 10 clients or even sub 20 now on like
Yeah,
reviews, I think it's really hard to get the conversion, even if you get like traffic on you or get,
yeah,
visitors on you just compared to other people. If you're not kind of, I think in most areas, the established clinics kind of will have 50 plus reviews,
yeah,
on their local listings. So yeah, I would advise anyone kind of new into it to really, a bit like you did, use the family and friends, particularly if they haven't done much work on their training, and had much short experience, get the family and friends, do some, low cost models to just get
yeah,
that portfolio up. And even, I think it was quite good what you said there about even if you just broke even on the cost, you covered your
yeah,
ad spend or whatever, yes, might not make you super rich that year, but it's going to give you the foundation where then,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily either have to spend out so much if you don't want to, or you can kind of close more clients.
It's a difficult one because one of the things I was really aware of, and I know I keep talking about the sort of comparing this to the music industry, but that's kind of what I knew up to this point. And one of the things I was really aware of was I didn't want to be the person that kind of undercut everybody else, because I just felt like, sure, in the short term, it could have been great for me. I could have been doing SMP treatments for 100 quid all in, and it would have made me busy, and I would have got a load of, a big portfolio out of it, and kind of, cleaned up with clients. But the sustainability just isn't there. And long term for me, I didn't want to get into the SMP industry as a sort of, oh, I'll do this for a couple of years and I'll make some money and I'll get out. That was never my intention. And I think I've seen it happen in the music industry. I see sort of younger players not stealing gigs off more established players, but going to venues and saying, well, we'll do it for X amount. And it's, way cheaper than the guys that have been playing. And that's cool. When you're young and you maybe don't have a mortgage and you don't have car payments, you don't have kids to feed, that's fine. But there comes a point in their lives when they get to that point and suddenly they go, hang on a minute, we can't get paid properly for the work we're doing. And they've been part of that problem, So for me, I didn't want to just go in with, dirt cheap prices and sort of set that up and undercut everyone else, because I just thought long term, it's not going to do me any favors. I thought I'll get a reputation as the clinic where you can go and get SMP for a fraction of what you're paying other places. And, as you get more established, you realize that there are so many costs involved with running a clinic. It's not, I think people sort of look at the cost of SMP, and I've had clients before and they go, hang on a minute, that's X number of pounds an hour. Or I had one client say to me, how much? He said, are you driving a Bentley or something? And it's like, you don't want to get into that thing with them, but there's so many behind the scene costs that you've got to cover, and it's not profit. What you charge a client for their treatment is not profit. There's so many other things. So yeah, I've always tried to price my treatments sort of realistically and fairly, but I never wanted to do that thing of undercutting everyone just to get work. I think if your work's good enough, then you don't need to do that. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And sometimes as well, it can be harder to go back up
Yeah,
after you've come down. So I think kind of what you said with the clientele, and I think that's a very good point you said there about. I think that's not just your industry. I think that's any business that kind of does business to customer.
yeah,
They kind of don't necessarily look at the cost of training, the cost of overhead. They're just like looking on the hourly rate and stuff, and
yeah.
which can make it hard to stick to. Like if you're in a consultation or if people are thinking, but I think that's quite good that you've managed to keep your base price and keep pushing that forward. And people don't necessarily value things right when they're looking at it from a performance, not performance, purchaser's
Yeah.
viewpoint. So, okay, we've kind of touched a little bit on social media, and I know we were kind of going on talking about a bit, the expectations and the representations. So, if we kind of delve into that a little bit deeper,
Yeah.
I know, there's some, we could say, false representations of SMP. I know some people kind of maybe use a little bit of Photoshop here and there
Yeah.
now. Maybe use pictures that aren't 100% their own. So I know maybe you've got some insights on that.
Yeah. It's a really difficult one because I know there are murmurings in, some of the maybe forums and chat groups that I have with other SMP artists. And there is this question of, should you call people out for certain practices? For me, just one of the things that I say to potential clients is, have a look at my social media. All of the work on there is genuinely my work and they're unedited photos. So the only editing I ever do on my photos is cropping them to size. And that's usually to try and get a before and after, a similar size, so it, looks better on the social media platform. But I don't know. I can only go on what my feelings on this are, and maybe other people see it totally differently. But one of the big red flags, I think, when I see people posting SMP work is that they go black and white as soon as they do their after shot. There's a black and white photo. Well, I think that hides a lot, and I think I also see people using the sharpening tools on Photoshop or whatever app they're using, where you see the SMP area they've treated, and you can see that it's so crisp. And as soon as you look outside that area, the rest of the photo doesn't look anything like that. And again, I just think it goes back to that thing of total transparency. You know, if I'm going to be totally transparent with a client, I want to show them pictures of my work, genuine pictures that haven't been edited, and I want to say, these are the type of results you can expect. If I go sharpening images and changing the contrast and the color, that's another one that I see a lot of, where you see the before and after in the after picture. You can see even the background of the room, the color has totally changed where the photo's been edited. And I just think you're kind of setting yourself up for problems there. I mean, I think giving clients realistic expectations of SMP is just the best way to go. You know, they know exactly what they're getting into at that point. And if you try and make your photos look, maybe for want of a better term, better or crisper, or you change the saturation, you're kind of giving them unrealistic expectations, I think, at that point. So yeah, I do. That's one of the things that I struggle with on social media. I think there needs to be more regulation, I suppose, or people just need to be a bit more honest and a bit more transparent. I mean, I get it, because the industry is, you know, the whole beauty industry, it's a very visual thing, isn't it? So, and that was one of the things that's one of the things that really hit me when I got into this was, you know, we all live in these echo chambers in social media. We follow the people who say the things that we like to hear and who have similar ideologies and they think a similar way to us. And for me, for the last 25 years or whatever, that on my social media has been creatives, it's been artists and musicians and people who think a certain way. And suddenly I was just finding this whole other world that I'd kind of never really been exposed to. And for me, it was very visual, and it was, I'm not going to say superficial, because I wouldn't say it's that, but there was that sort of emphasis on the way things look and the way things appear, which obviously, you know, that's what we do. But it was difficult for me getting onto social media as a new SMP artist and switching my phone on in the morning and seeing, you know, people in their Ferraris with their 40 grand Rolexes on saying, off to the clinic today, work hard, play hard. You know, that was a totally new thing for me. I get it, you know, and we've got to make it look as good as possible on social media, but I think there needs to be, I don't know, it needs to be expanded on more than that, because again, you know, I'm a bit older, I'm a bit more secure in myself, and I'm not necessarily swayed by that stuff in the same way that a new artist would be. But I think we can really set people up with unrealistic expectations of what the industry is. And that could be really disheartening for somebody who's new to this.
Yeah, I think a lot of the training kind of sells a bit, like, you know, the business side of it. I think, like you said, where you found, you know, there's a lot more to business. They kind of sell it as a little bit easier than it is. Like, you know, you've paid your money for your course, get yourself a nice site, and that's it.
Yeah.
You're going to be pulling in sort of 6 figures a month. And yeah, it's really not that easy in any business, really.
I'd be interested to know your thought. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that, because one of the things that I sort of just touched on then was, should we call that kind of stuff out? And I get that if somebody's new to an industry and maybe their work isn't of a fantastic standard, I would agree with constructive criticism. I wouldn't agree with just, you know, slating somebody for the sake of it. You know, they're maybe there to learn. They'd probably appreciate some advice from more experienced artists. That would probably be helpful. For me, like you just mentioned, you said, you know, that thing of, oh, you can get into SMP and you can make X amount a month. Yes, you can. And it was sort of, it wasn't sold to me, not by Tom, who I trained with. It wasn't sold in this way at all. But I see a lot of people selling SMP as, get a new career, get into SMP, it's a 6-figure business. Yeah, it can be. Of course it can. But what they don't say is, well, yeah, if you're willing to spend, I don't know, 6 grand a month on this, that, and the other, then you can make 100 grand doing the treatments. You know, that stuff never gets mentioned. And I've seen recently, obviously, I don't want to name anyone, but I've seen a lot of people advertising training and sort of being even more specific than that and saying, if you get 2 clients a month or whatever, or do 2 clients a week, you'll end up making X amount. And I just looked at it, I thought, how do you make that? Doing that doesn't add up at all. I think that's misleading.
Numbers. Yeah. I think
Um,
there's a lot of that. I think that's similar kind of in, more in the market industry as well. I think with like the advertisers where they'll tell you like we'll get 30, 40 clients a month guaranteed,
yeah,
but don't tell you, yeah, you're still going to give us 5 grand ad spend to achieve that.
yeah.
There's a lot of context left
But
out.
see, that baffles me as well from because I've spoken to you, a number of times in the past about marketing, and you've always been totally honest and transparent with me, and it's always been a really good conversation. And that, you're not, you understand this about SMP. You're not necessarily just buying a treatment. You're sort of investing in a long-term thing with the person who's going to do your treatment. You've got to feel comfortable with them. You've got to trust what they're going to do. For me, it's the same. That's how I see it when I'm speaking to anyone who's in marketing. I've got to trust that person and think, yeah, actually, they're on the level. And I get so many emails or messages on social media saying, we've had a look at your website and you're not ranking at all for any keyword. Your SEO is terrible. This is the. And I just think, well, we've started this conversation with a blatant lie, because all you have to do is Google it, and you're going to find out that my SEO is good and that we're doing this. Yeah, maybe it can be improved in certain areas. I don't know. But to come at me straight away and in the first sentence you're lying to me, there's no way I'm going to get into a relationship with that person. It's crazy, but it happens, doesn't it? We all see it.
Yeah, I think it comes back to, I think it's the same in industry, and it's people try to do the unrealistic promises to get the quicker
Yeah,
sell. But I'm kind of a similar approach to you. Like if I take you on as a client, I'm looking at you being my client for as long as you're in business essentially and
yeah,
grow with you.
yeah,
So if I give you unrealistic expectations on the first couple of months, you're just going to turn around in a couple of months and say, hey, you promised me I was going to get this and not. And
yeah,
that's why, yeah, I'd much rather say, realistically, this is what you get. It's going to take this long. You might need this, you might not. And then,
yeah,
if we do business, great. If we don't, I'll continue to kind of just be in that general network.
yeah,
I think, yeah, like you said, I know you kind of wanted my opinion on calling out, so I will jump in. I think, yeah, like I think in context, some of the, particularly with SMP, you've got to take some of the people might have not been trained right. So if they've just come out, I think if you're more experienced artists, I don't necessarily think you should jump on straight away criticizing their work. Maybe
yeah,
in the first instance, reach out in the forums, reach out and say, hey, look, you know, this could be improved. Have you tried this? See how they respond to that. Obviously, if they
yeah,
kind of come back and keep going, then maybe take it different. But yeah, I think, a lot of the bad outputs could be, not necessarily bad student, bad teacher. So you kind of need
yeah,
to step in. On the other hand, if it's someone who's a lot more established, they're maybe getting where they are just because they're throwing some money down,
yeah,
and it's kind of harmful to the industry. I think what you've got to remember is S&P is still relatively new. I still speak to people, and when I tell them like I do aesthetic marketing, I'll kind of tell them aesthetic clinics, PMU, S&P. A lot of the time, I still have to explain what S&P
yeah,
is,
sure.
and outside, I think like you said, it's quite a niche sort of network, and we sort
Yeah,
of all know each other through Facebook and stuff. But yeah, step outside of that, and I'm still kind of explaining it to people, which means one, there's still quite an untapped market to get into, but
yeah,
also preserving that reputation overall as the industry grows is quite sort of important.
yeah, yeah,
And yeah, I think the guys who are established kind of do need to take a role in that and making sure as it gets more known, people
yeah,
aren't looking at kind of the Lego head work and thinking, oh, that's what it
totally.
is, and it becomes a joke.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's a big part of it for me. If I, and I don't call people out on things. I sort of think about it, and I might even type something and then delete it because I don't want to be that person. But it's, if I were to ever call anyone out on anything, it wouldn't be a personal thing about me. It would be more about the sustainability of the industry, because I really do think, I think the damage that can be done by potential clients seeing bad SMP massively outweighs the massively outweighs like a good consultation that you might have with them, or or seeing some good work. I think that would be, to me, potential clients, the number one concern is that they're going to end up with that Lego head look.
Yeah.
And all it takes is for a potential client to see somebody in the street who's got that look that really poor SMP, and that can put them off. And I think that's such a massive thing that we need to think about. And you mentioned this about not only bad treatments but bad training, and that is something that I really take issue with that, because for me, coming from an education background, so I don't think, oh, I did mention that I've been lecturing. Yeah, so I've been a lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire for about 15 or 17 years now. So education's like been, kind of the core of what I do. Seeing people who are maybe even not, sort of subpar SMP artists themselves, and suddenly they're offering training to other people, the impact that can have on the industry and the sustainability of the industry is absolutely massive. And I really don't think it should be underestimated, because if somebody is churning out, in a year, they might churn out 50 students, and those students are all doing bad work, and they don't know it because the person that trained them is doing bad work. That is huge, because if the SMP industry sort of becomes dominated by people like that, and it starts to get a reputation as being, oh yeah, SMP is that thing where you end up with a blue head and it looks awful, I've seen it, that's catastrophic for the whole industry. And that's the only reason that I would think about calling somebody out on that, because I just think, we all want this industry to sustain. We want it to be here in 10 years time. We want it to grow and go from strength to strength. And I just think, if you're training people to make money in the short term and you're doing a bad job of training them, you're gonna decimate the industry. That's how I see it. Maybe that's a bit sort of extreme, and I'm getting a bit carried away and making a bigger deal of it than it needs to be. But that's my opinion on it. I think it could be really damaging for everybody, and then none of us are going to be doing SMP.
Yeah, no, definitely it will impact. I mean, I think the whole cosmetic industry is due a bit of a sort of regulation, especially in the UK, uphaul. Kind of, I know there's some stuff going through Parliament. I think SMP is going to kind of be on the back end of that, just because of where they
Yeah,
fall outside on the MediaSex. But I know certainly in London, I think they've got stricter now on the licensing
yeah.
for getting there. And I know the kind of push is, to making sure there's like the off-qual training and the government regulated. And I think with that, there's kind of needs to be two sides. I was speaking with someone the other day, because obviously the off-qual and the regulated make sure you can actually teach properly, kind of similar to
Yeah,
but then you also need to make sure they actually have the right skill as an artist as well in terms of
mm.
actually doing the work. So there's definitely a push towards that, I think, over this next year.
It's sort of twofold as
Come
well,
in.
isn't it? Because like bad work is one thing, and I think as artists, and also you're so heavily involved in this industry, we have to remember that we're not necessarily seeing it in the same way that potential clients see it. Like, I might look at some work and think, I don't think that's particularly good work. But a client might just really not know. And I know Stevie G sort of talks about this and says, just because a client thinks it's good doesn't make it good, and that's not good enough. And he's absolutely right. But we do have to sort of bear that in mind, that a client might look at some work and go, no, I'm happy with that. That's good enough for me. And if you sort of equate that to the tattooing world, you can go and spend £3,000 on a full sleeve of tattooing. You can also go and find somebody down the road who does it for 300 quid. And there will be people who say, actually, my sort of criteria for getting it done and the things that are important to me in the decision making process are different to yours. And therefore, yes, I've paid £300 for this, but I'm really happy with it because I've paid £300 for that tattoo. I know it's not as good as the one for £3,000, but that doesn't matter to me because I can afford this one and I think it looks good. And we have to kind of bear that in mind with SMP as well, that some clients will look at SMP and say, yes, I get that it's not as good as that maybe, but for me, for what I need and what I want, that's cool. And so I appreciate that, and I respect that, and that's great. But then with the training thing, it's the hygiene, it is, the sort of health and safety. That's something that you can't ever excuse, sort of poor standards in that area. And just because a client might have paid a bit less money, and you know that the final treatment isn't going to be as good as one of the more experienced artists, that doesn't then excuse poor practices when it comes to health and safety and putting clients at risk and putting the artist at risk. And that's one of the things that I see all the time. And I know There's Melissa Murphy, who is a really successful trainer and PMU artist and SMP artist, and she's based quite near to me. And she talks about this online sometimes. Um, there's just no excuse for it. When you see people putting videos out and they're training someone and they've got their watch on hanging down and it's touching the client's head, or the machine isn't wrapped, or that, there's just like so many things, and that's something that really needs to change for SMP to be sort of taken more seriously, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. 2024, I hope. Like I say, I know there's the Parliament thing coming out, and I don't know if you've seen, you might have seen me share it. I work with a company called Cosmetic. They're like a new directory, and they're kind of at the forefront of that regulation. I'd recommend go and have a little look at them, because I think S&P will be at the back end of that pull up. But basically, they will check and verify all your documents, make sure the training's appropriate, and you can
Yeah,
actually go on there and, check that who you're working with, has done appropriate training, is licensed to do the service they are doing. So that is quite a good thing going forward. And I think definitely
yeah,
in the aesthetics industry, it's more focused on, but I can see SMP and PMU kind of being pulled along with that. So I know you've mentioned quite a few names. I kind of familiar with most of them. Some of our audience might not be. So, like, what industry related, do you consume for inspiration, knowledge? Are there anyone particularly you'd sort of recommend in the industry that, like, if people are coming into SMP to kind of follow work they should watch?
it's so many good ones now, and like I said before, it kind of comes down to what style you like and what approach you like. That's one of the things I'd say is don't like be open to these things. Check out loads of different artists. I would say, I mean, some people have been really helpful to me along the way. Grant Emerson has been really helpful when I've needed advice on things and sort of chatted to him. He's been great. Michelle Broom has been great as well. I think we started in the industry around a similar time, so that's been really good to sort of get her perspective on things. Tom May, I've mentioned Tom a couple of times. I'm so grateful for the fact that I trained with Tom, because seeing, like we've talked about, seeing so much bad training out there, that is, to me, that would have been a make or break thing. Like if I'd have gone and invested money and had bad training, there's no way I'd still be doing this now. There's no way I'd have built the business that I've built. So I'm really I owe a lot to Tom because his training was so good. And I know that he had a background in lecturing as well. He'd been a college tutor before he did the SMP thing. So that was one of the reasons that I chose him. And then, yeah, I mean, there's probably no point trying to pinpoint individual people for their style of SMP. But I will say that one of the artists that I really like to sort of check out on social media and like to listen to what they have to say is Ollie Hughes from Appear Natural. And one of the reasons for that is that I mean, I don't know Ollie well, we've messaged a couple of times, but he's someone that I always respect for his sort of honesty about things. I messaged with him once about a picture of a treatment that he put out, and it just looked so good to me. And I messaged him and said how incredible it was. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. His response, he came back to me and he said, "I wish they all looked that great," you know. And I think it was that thing of you are dealing with skin and all treatments, like I was saying before, you aim for that level of consistency, but there are going to be certain differences in the way the SMP looks on certain skins. And I think Ollie's talked a lot about mental health in the industry, which again, if you think back to what we've been just saying about that image sort of focus thing, there are days when you wake up and you see videos of people getting in their Ferraris and their Porsches with their Rolexes, and then I go and get in my Skoda Superb, and I think, where have I gone wrong? So it's really good to hear someone like Ollie talking about mental health in the industry, and yeah, he's been sort of someone that I've looked up to just because he seems to be really honest about things,
Yeah,
that's been good. But yeah, lots of great artists about that have been really helpful.
that's great. Yeah, I think that's definitely, and you're kind of showing the point there, like why honesty is good in the industry, because we all have people in our industry. I've got people in marketing and SEO who I kind of follow and look up to.
Yeah,
And it's easy sometimes to think like they don't have the problems or everything's going right for them. So when they can share
yeah,
that, oh, actually, no, we have the same daily business struggles. It just might be on a different level. But
yeah,
like, oh, actually, no, everything's not
yeah,
perfect. That can be kind of motivational, even from a mindset thing to like, okay, right. So, even they're a few years ahead of me, they're still struggling, but they're still going forward, they're still
Yeah.
overcoming it. Yeah, so I think that's why it's good to kind of share the realism on your business. So have we got any, the next maybe 6, 12 months, other than doing the great consistent SMP, is there any significant business challenges or, plans or goals you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, this is something that's constantly on my mind, and it's, up to this point, I've kind of, especially when I speak to clients and they ask me about, oh, do you do other things? So one of the things that I've said is no, it's just SMP. In the beauty industry, I just do SMP, and that means that if I'm in the clinic for 20 hours in a week, that's 20 hours of SMP. I'm not doing sort of lip blush, I'm not doing brows, I'm not doing this, that, and the other, and a little bit of SMP. It's always that. But I don't know, I've thought lately about maybe, sort of scaling the business and thinking about other things to get into. And I've floated, the idea of, I really like the idea of getting into doing brows, but I don't know enough about that side of the industry. And I think for maybe sort of women who are quite glamorous and want to get that done, maybe they want to go to another woman who's very glamorous in a glamorous clinic rather than some middle-aged, bald, beardy, tattooed bloke to do their eyebrows. I don't know. I've thought about laser removal. There's a number of things, and actually, I've got a guy who's he does my SEO for me, and he's been really helpful. When I'm having these thoughts, I'll sort of send him a message and float an idea, and he does a bit of research about how saturated the market is, or what are up and coming treatments and all sorts of things. So I don't know. I would like to add some strings to my bow, kind of thing, and start to offer more services. I guess if you're looking longer term than that, my ideal goal would be to have a bigger clinic where I have a number of artists working out of Oakwell Clinic and offering different services. But maybe they wouldn't be ones that I do, or maybe get specialists in to do those. So that's maybe something I'd like to think about.
And then just generally, so I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but so that's kind of your future SMP and the future of SMP. Where do you see it heading, and what role you see Simon playing as a central figure in that, hopefully?
I mean, one of the things I've kind of learned from, again, the music industry is that nothing, for me, I just think nothing lasts, right? And it's not a sort of negative or pessimistic thing, but I've found myself in the past where I might be on a particular touring theatre show or whatever, and while you're in it in that moment, you think, wow, this is what life is. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, that stops. And you no longer do that. You never do that gig again. You move on, and your sort of work completely changes, and you're in this other field for a little bit. And I kind of think that for me, as much as I want SMP to be a sustainable thing, I want to be doing this for the foreseeable future. I don't take it for granted, and I don't think it'll always be the way that it is now. So I'm not really well placed to say what the future of SMP is. I think the standard of SMP in general, even though we've talked about the bad results, I think the standard of SMP in general is going up. I think that there are a lot of great artists out there. I think we owe so much to the sort of early, I guess, pioneers of SMP. Like you've got Paul Clark. What we owe to him as an industry is massive, because as you said before, you're speaking to people and mentioning SMP, and you're still having to explain what it is. I can't imagine how hard it was for Paul at the beginning to say to people, I can tattoo hair on you. Because if somebody had said that to me before I knew what SMP was, I would have run as fast as I could in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like those early guys, they've paved the way for all of us. And the groundwork that they must have had to put in just to get SMP as a sort of legitimate, recognized, respected industry is absolutely huge. So yeah, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know what other hair loss solutions are going to come out. I think SMP is a really, really great solution. If it's the right client and you manage their expectations, I think SMP is great. It's such, as we know, I don't need to do the spiel. It's such low maintenance. It's easy. It looks great. And I think probably even if other solutions come out, there will always be a place for good SMP. And I think the more the regulation that comes in, and then the more respect that the industry gains, and the higher the standard of training, because that's my real bugbear, as you can tell, the higher standard of training, And as people are just, getting better at their craft, I think that's going to set us up for a good future. I hope it does, because I really do think SMP is great. And I'm looking forward to getting mine done when I get some time, because I still haven't had it done, because I ended up building the business and doing that rather than getting the treatment I was looking for in the first place.
Actually deferred it. Yeah, that'll be the interesting one. Who you might not want to say now, but yeah, who are you picking for doing yours?
Well, obviously I trained with Tom May, and he has mentioned to me a number of times, you've got to get down and have the treatment. But he's based down in Bristol, and with me being in Leeds, I know it's an excuse, but it's a long way for me to go and juggle with, every time I sort of find a free period, I get clients booking in, or I know that I'm going to have to be around to take my kids to after school clubs or whatever, and it's been really difficult. No one's offered me free SMP at this point, have they? I don't know. We'll see. I have thought,
You might get some offers now.
well, we'll see, hopefully. But yeah, there's a number of artists that I really like. I think they're doing great work, and yeah, there's a load of guys that I'd be happy to do, guys and women who would be happy to do my SMP for me. But it's just a case, for me, it's just a case of finding the time now, doing it.
That's good. Well, Simon, it has been great speaking to you. You've had some great insight there to the industry.
Thanks. Yeah, I've enjoyed being here. Thanks.
I think hopefully the listeners are going to, find a lot of valuable information in there. They can just Oakwell Clinic is a website.
Oakwellclinic.com.
Yeah. .com, and I think Oakwell Clinic on Instagram as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got quite a lot on Instagram and Facebook as well. So yeah, all my
That's
work.
cool. So yeah, I would definitely encourage people to, check out Simon, see what he's doing and what he's about.
And I would just like to say quickly, yeah, if because of the help that I got from those artists that I've sort of mentioned, that was invaluable to me, and a lot of it was just so important. I mean, even I should mention Craig Bottomley High as well, because I've spoken to him even more recently while I've been established, and that's been just invaluable. And I think if there are any up and coming artists or sort of people new to the industry who are wondering about things, they've got questions and they want some advice, like just drop me, if they like my work and they want to speak to me, I'm always happy to take that time. If anyone wants to drop me a message, give me a call, hop on a video call, whatever. I got so much support from other people in the industry. If anyone needs that in return from me, then I'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, that's great. That's valuable. Pay it forward. I think that's definitely good for the industry.